Hi guys, and welcome to a review of something which is very unique, very special, which is a brand from Japan known as 634 Ears. It is, well, basically the result, the coming to life of the hard work of a DIYer by the name of Musashi Saita. I hope I have said his name properly. And well, he's been making IEMs for a number of years now, all hand built, all hand assembled, and he's been making these IEMs to a very high standard with a very careful choosing of the materials used for the shell, for the front of the shell, for the back of the shell, for the drivers being used as well. I mean, the gentleman has taken upon himself to go into each area which make up, building an IEM, and make sure that everything is chosen with the utmost care to obtain ultimately the best possible result in terms of sound. And obviously the 64 ears are tailored or have a sound which is very much a sound that is of his preference. So he hasn't worried about tuning an IEM for the masses, as he believes that there will be more than sufficient people out there that will appreciate his tuning style and his tuning preference, and thus created this line of IEMs. What I have in front of you here, these three particular models, are the LOAK T, which are the top of the line. We are talking about IEMs which start around $600, and then depending on what you actually choose I mean, for example, let me take here this is a LOAK T closed back with the cocobolo wood being used in the rear plate. Okay, so you can basically choose the shell material, okay, and in this case it's stainless steel. You can also choose the front of the shell material, in this case it's titanium. You can see the seam there, and you can choose the back of the shell, which in this case is cocobolo wood. And the conjunction of those three materials and years and years of studying and hearing the differences and looking for the differences has enabled Mr. Saita to know how to mix and match and how to recommend depending on what our tuning or our preferred style will be, always keeping in mind that the basic premise of the sound will be a V-shaped signature. Okay, so in essence, excuse me guys, in essence these are all IEMs which have got a V-shaped signature, but where you will be able to fine-tune that V-shaped signature with then getting different results in terms of the bass and the upper mids and highs by choosing what material you want everything to be made of. The differences can be more or less pronounced. For example, as I mentioned, this is the LOAK T closed with the cocobolo. This is the LOAK T with the titanium copper backplate, and being copper on the backplate, what basically this does is it gives you a fuller sound in the bass, and when I show you the graphs in a couple of minutes, you'll understand what I mean. So you've got a significant amount extra of bass, so a warmer tonality, at a cost of losing a little bit of detail up top. So but the basic design, the basic style of tuning is still maintained. And then on this side here, I've got the cocobolo, the open styled one, okay, with a snakewood backplate, and this one again changes that balance of bass and upper mids and highs. And in this case, what you get is more upper mids and more highs, slightly more highs actually than upper mids, and this gives us a sound which is more detailed. There's more little twinklies and sparklies and so on and so forth. So it's a more open sound. Basically, in terms of the bass, it is very much the same as the LOAK T, the closed one with the cocobolo. So as I said, Mr. Saita, he's designed these IEMs to a great care. I mean, you go to his website and, well, I have to say it is a little bit confusing, but you go to his website and you can, I'll just show you here. Okay, so these are the various models that he has. The 9i NE is the entry level model, and we're talking about $300+ over there. And then you have the LOAK, TS, TB, and TC, which refer to copper, brass, in terms of the materials used. The Miro AK, LOAK B, the LOAK T, which is the ones that that I have here for you guys today. So the closed with the cocobolo, or then with the copper backplate, and then we have as well the open back, like the snake, or the one with the snake wood backplate. So there's loads of models to choose from, loads of finishes that you can use on the backplates in terms of the the metal that you want, the wood, the style of wood. I mean, everything will introduce subtle changes. The hardness of the wood will make the upper mids and highs sharper, more detailed, will extend, the highs will not extend the highs. But the one characteristic that is always maintained is that although this is a V-shaped signature, so and when you actually look at the graphs, and when I tell you some of the things that I'm going to be telling you now in the next couple of minutes, it's actually curious to see because I mean, for example, I take a CCA CXS, okay. The CCA CXS has got a signature which is very similar to these IEMs, especially to the copper, especially to the copper backplate and to the cocobolo backplate. And we are sometimes a little bit hard in criticizing that style of tuning and saying, that style of tuning is not good, and so on and so forth. Even myself, I've perhaps sometimes as well been a little bit hard. But at the end of the day, we need to understand what is the premise. And ultimately, what will dictate if that signature works or doesn't work is the quality of the drivers being used. And when you are using a good quality driver and good quality materials that will introduce them a certain amount of effect to the sound in terms of resonances and so on and so forth, you can end up with a signature which on paper might look won't be exactly audiophile, but when you listen to it, you say to yourself, wow, I couldn't be further from the truth in terms of how good it actually sounds. And that's the case here with the 64 ears. I mean, this very smart selection of the materials being used in conjunction with a very high quality driver, because the driver being used is definitely a high quality driver, enables us to have, yes, what is in essence a V-shaped signature, okay, but with various degrees of adjustment being possible. On the cocobolo, for example, here, really nice bass. The mids can come across a little bit recessed, but the reality is that the quality of the bass is so good that you don't feel as much that dip that you would feel if you were talking about perhaps a similar signature in terms of its visual aspect, but with a lower quality driver being used. So very nice bass, clean, detailed, very fast, with loads of texture. I mean, definitely musicality is one of the things that shines in these IEMs. It's supposed to be musical. It's supposed to be pleasant to listen to. It's about the music that you are listening to. Excuse me. The mids, in terms of the male and female voices, perfect. Female voices can be a little bit sharp at times, but nothing which is offensive, and nothing that nice amount of bass, that it's got that nice thickness that it brings from behind, that nice girth that it adds to the mids, doesn't resolve. And even if you have certain peaks and dips and around that 4, 5, 6K area, which can be a problem to some of us, it's never an issue. Pretty good extension. Honestly, a really nice sounding IEM. Of course, this is all very relative. It all depends then on what exactly you want to listen to or what style of music you listen to. Personally, I feel that these IEMs work very well, although I tried quite a few genres, mind you, but I personally feel that they work very well with things which are, with loads of instruments and that kind of that style of music. I feel is what allows the 64 ears stuff to shine. So if I'm listening to something like Arancio Bossa from Andrea Razauti, it sounds they do that really good. If I'm listening to Twilight from Brian Simpson, again the same thing. And only very seldomly, like for example, Up and Up from Jeff Ryan. Yes, that sax can be a little bit too much, especially in these two versions. It can be a little bit intense. It's not aggressive, it's not unpolished, but it can be intense. Okay, but it's an intense that is done with quality behind it. If that's a half decent way of trying to explain it. Okay. Comfort Zone, the live version from Larry Carlton. I mean, you hear the guitar plucks on here, and it's absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. The open back LOAK T with the snakewood backplate is very similar to the closed. Very similar. You notice a little bit more airiness in the bass, but it's in the upper mids and treble where you see more detail. So they are very similar, but with more details here. Okay, it's got a more open sound. It's got a more airy sound. All right. So in that aspect, with regards to then the technicalities, I would say that this one is slightly superior to this one and to this one, to the copper backplate one. The copper backplate one, as I mentioned earlier, that confers the bass a good 3 dBs extra with regards to the other two, and it loses a little bit on the treble and the upper mids and treble. So it makes it for a darker sound, which on a song like Jeff Ryan's Up and Up, yes, it is advantageous, because it doesn't let that sax kind of get to you. And maybe on some other songs, that extra warmth that you get from the backplate, adding that extra amount of bass, can make there be a slight loss of resolution, but overall very pleasant to listen to as well. If I have to choose out of all of these, which is probably the one that I like the most, I would probably choose this one the first, and then the open back. I would probably say that this is my favorite, the copper backplate LOAK T, and then the open back LOAK T. Although, let me also be perfectly honest, the difference is minimal. I would be happy with either one of them. Okay. Technically, as I said, these IEMs are capable enough. They have a good soundstage in terms of the soundstage. Overall, this one is the winner. In terms of the imaging as well, this one is the winner. But it's not in the technicalities that I think that these IEMs shine. Honestly, I really think that these IEMs shine on the musicality end of things, and on the fact that it's a V-shaped signature that sounds really good. I mean, these IEMs remind me a lot of, for example, the VCE. And the only reason why I actually didn't put the VEC here is because, and I've chosen others, it's because the signature is sufficiently different for there to be noticeable differences, big noticeable differences. But I like this kind of old school kind of sound these IEMs have, and that I find in the Venture Electronic CA, and I find in the Tipsy Titi Romso as well. What then did I choose to select for kind of a comparison, or kind of give you an idea of what these IEMs sound, without you actually having to spend so much money and going and buying these, because any one of the three above is substantially more accessible. Well, the Tri-I1 not so much, but the Yuko-Tech RE1 Pro and the ISN Audio D10 are relatively accessible. The Yuko-Tech RE1 is an IEM that I will be reviewing a little bit more in depth, But this has got very much the type of sound that you find here in the LOAK T, the Cocobolo, and in the LOAK T, the open back. Very similar. In terms of the bass, it's very equal. Very similar. Just a little bit extra energy there, around 6, 7, 8K on the Yucotec. But overall, if you listen to a Yucotec RE1 Pro, I would say that you get about 90% of the sound of the 64 ears, and if you consider that costs $100, it's a sixth of the price. So if you want something along these lines, which is a premium sounding V-shaped IM, okay, but you can't afford going that far, then definitely that is a good option. Another one that I also chose, because at the moment I heard the copper backplate 64s, it reminded me of this IM, is the D10. The D10 is very much an older model, and very much kind of an unsung hero to a certain extent. Why? Because first of all, it has got a relatively high price. We're talking about $140, which for a single DD, in a market where you have so many single DDs, which have probably got a sound which will be more pleasing to a wider variety of people, it is a substantial amount of money. But the truth is this: ISN know what they're doing. Penon knows what they're doing, and the D10 is a testament to that. I mean, this 9.2mm driver is absolutely amazing. It plays seriously well. The bass of it is every bit as good, in my opinion, as the bass of the copper black plate. I'm trying to just find something on my notes to actually tell you guys about before I forget. 1 second. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I mentioned 9.2, but it's actually not 9.2. It's a 9mm. So in terms of the bass, the tonality, it's amazing. It's got really good note weight. It's got very much that old school timbre. The vocals are lush. There's no sibilance. There's really again a very good sense of musicality, to the point that I would actually more times prefer listening to the D10 than I actually preferred listening to the not prefer. Prefer is not the, I wouldn't say prefer is the correct word. That's maybe a wrong choice of words there. I would say that there were plenty of times where I was unable to distinguish between the two of them, and that's how good actually the D10 is. The D10 only loses slightly, in my opinion, to the copper backplate 64 ears in terms of how much detail it can go fetch up top. That's the only area where it really loses out. And it's again not by much, but in terms of its musicality, of the bass, the tonality, the timbre, the mids, the male vocals, they are trading serious blows, and I think that says a lot for the D10. Ultimately, yes, of course, the 64 ears is a better IEM. It does edge out slightly the D10 in fundamental parts, but it's up to you, the buyer, the consumer, that will decide if they want to pay that premium. Obviously the build quality here is amazing. That the driver here isn't a driver that will be more capable, and depending on what source you use, you can really, it is a very good IEM, but the D10 gives it a hell of a run for its money. And then the other one that I selected was the Tri i1. It's been out now for a while. And it's got a signature which again tends more towards the 64 copper backplate, but not as detailed, with less polished details up top in the upper mids and highs, and although the bass, the sub bass, the mid bass, and the low mids kind of graph the same, kind of look the same visually. When you listen to it, you notice that the 634 has got a better driver, and it's capable of showing that improved driver quality over the Tri i1. The Tri i1, we're talking about $270 more or less, so that already kind of starts going serious money territory. Obviously, I could have taken out a lot more IEMs to compare and so on, but I was trying to compare the 634 ears to stuff that has very similar sound, very similar graph, so that, you know, those of you that want to maybe have a perception of what the 64 ears sound like, but can't get hold of them because they are difficult to get hold of, let's be frank, you know, these three IEMs here will be substantially easier to get your hands on them, and will play very much, will give you a hint very much of what the 64 ears is. As I said earlier, the Yuko Tech, I would say, is about 90% of 85 to 90% of the LOAK T, the Cocobolo, or the LOAK T with the open back, and I would say the D10 is easily 90%, 95% even maybe, of what the copper back plate 64 ears is capable of doing. The Tri, I would say, is about 85% of what these IEMs is capable of doing. The biggest difference that I found here, especially on the D10 and on the Tri one, in comparison with any one of these three, is a slight loss of polish in the upper mids and treble. A slight loss of polish. And I guess that is all down to the fact that the driver being used here is a substantially higher quality driver. And that's it, guys. I mean, there's really not much more that I can say. As I mentioned earlier, these are not IEMs where the premise was on technicalities and being, you know, detail monsters and so on and so forth. Although, having said that, the truth is the Cocobolo and the open back are quite detailed. They are capable of very good micro detailing, you know, excellent resolution. So they've got sufficient technical abilities. Whether those technical abilities are conducive with their price tag of $600 or not, well, that's a different story. You know, as I usually say, I mean, if you've got loads of money to spend and you're not worried, then just go for it, buy them and have a listen. If obviously you are not as cash endowed and you know, money needs to be carefully assessed before deciding what you're going to buy, then you know, try and see if somehow you can get a loaner unit from somebody that might have, which is the case. I mean, I want to thank my friend Xavier for having been able to lend me these 64s. Otherwise I would never be able to do this review for you guys. And that's it. Anyway, I'll show you another graphs and we'll wrap it up. All right, you take care now. Hi guys, and welcome now to the graph section here for the 64 ears. I'm going to start off straight away with the LOAK T, the Cocobolo faceplate, which is this graph here. And as you can see, as I mentioned earlier, definitely V-shaped. I mean, we're talking about everything staying within a window of 64 to 77, 13 dB. So this is a big V-shape. Sub-bass emphasis. Yes, there's a little bit of bleeding to the mids, but nothing too crazy. And then you know, a relatively quick pin again, peaks just past 2K, a little bit of a dip. There's a little bit of a peak here close to 5 that can be offensive, and then a nice progressive drop, some extension past 10K. So it's actually a nice V-shaped graph. It's not offensive in my opinion, and it doesn't sound offensive. It sounds a little bit energetic in the upper mids and highs. Yes, it does, but it's not offensive. And the fact that we have this copious amount of bass here does help any possible hint of a real aggressiveness being a problem be deterred. Okay. Then the next one I'm going to show you is the LOAK T with the copper backplate. And as you can see this straight away, a good 3 dB extra bass here, which is very noticeable. And there's also a little bit of a loss here in the upper mids, in the treble and you know, the extension past 10K. So these two dictate a more darker sounding or a more warm sounding IEM, and again V-shaped with around 14 dBs of window of operation. As I said, I actually end up preferring this one because I can handle better this extra amount of bass and its negative aspects than I can handle that too intense reproduction of upper mids and highs on certain occasions, especially with stuff like I mentioned, you know, with sax and so on. So with brass instruments, it can get a little bit too much. It's never aggressive. It's just that it's too much. You know, it's just very intense. Excuse me. And then finally, the last one here, the blue one, which I'm actually going to take away the copper backplate, is the LOAK T with the open back. And as you can see, very similar and more extension. This here, although it doesn't say the whole story, and the fact that the bass is just, although in the same amount, it's just more light-hearted in the way that it comes across, make for more detailed, more open sounding. And funny enough, come to think of it now, if on the closed back, I was, there's that energy, which can sometimes be a little bit too much for me, especially. Not for me. On the open back, it's not as much, and that's why I prefer the open back and the copper back plate. Those two are my favorite over the Cocobolo. As compared now to some of the stuff that I selected, let me just leave here first the Cocobolo. If you recall, I said that the Cocobolo had in the Yucotec, the RE1 Pro, a very similar sounding IEM. And let me just put this in black so we can really see it. And as you can see, I wasn't far off. Very, very similar in the bass. I mean, this very well be left and right channel, very similar in the way the mids are done, just a little bit less here around 2K, but very similar, same peak at there. I mean, very similar, more detail. Actually, Yucotec comes closer even to the open back. Here is the open back, than it does to the Cocobolo. Okay, actually, let me just change the color here of the open back so you guys can see better. I'm gonna make it red. Okay, so the red graph here is the 64 ears, the open back, the snakewood back plate, and you can see basically the same kind of extension, the same peaks, very, very similar sounding. The Yucotec is a very nice sounding IEM. I'll be making a review for it soon, and were it not for the fact that it's also somewhat difficult to get, although easier to get than the 64 ears, it would be an IEM that could very well be more popular, because it does have a really good sound. It does have, and when I say that it's like 90, maybe even 95% of the sound of some of these 64 ears, I'm honestly not exaggerating. I mean, when you consider the price difference, definitely, I mean, you can safely say that. Okay, and then the other one that I also selected, if you guys recall, was the ISN, the D10. And the D10, I actually said, let me just put here first the copper back plate. Okay, so this is the copper back plate, 64 ears, the LOAK T, and now the ISN is this one here. And I think it's very much self-explanatory. Bass, very similar. I actually prefer sometimes even more the bass of the ISN. Although the ISN does seem to have more energy in the upper mids and treble, when you listen to it, yes, it does have, but at the same time, it has less detail in the treble and in the space. It's got less. It's not as detailed. And I'm comparing this to the copper backplate, which is the thicker sounding one. If I was to compare this to, for example, the open back one, okay, this is the open back, and let me just change here quickly the color of the open back so you guys can see the open back is in black now, guys. So in black the open back 64, in red the ISN D10. There it's very noticeable that loss of detail and polish up top. Although you also notice that it doesn't have the bass of the D10. The D10, especially in Larry Carlton's live, the pluck of the guitars is absolutely surreal. And then the final one that I also selected was the Tri I1. And the Tri I1 again was very similar to the in terms of graph to the copper backplate 64 ears, although and it's the brown line. The green line is the 64, the brown line is the Tri. Although the reality is that it seems to have more energy in the treble when you listen to it, it actually doesn't. And what you do notice is that it's less polished. It's not as classy, let's put it that way, in terms of its upper mids and treble compared to the 64 years. And just finally, because I mentioned that as well, I mentioned that the CCA CXS, there we go, that's the CCA CXS, and I'm going to be comparing it here with the Cocobolo. So the Cocobolo is in red and the CCA is in green. And you know, it's actually quite curious, because it's not in the bass that I saw the difference. Yes, the bass of the 64 is a little bit more quality, a little bit more detail, a little bit more resolving, fine. But it's in the upper mids, treble, and air that I saw the difference between the two of them. But still, it wasn't, yes, noticeable, very easy to identify that difference. But it's not like it's the CCA was doing a bad job. No, obviously I'm not saying in any way that the CCA is comparable to the 64s. No, I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is the CCA, we look at that graph and we are quick to, V-shaped, the typical KZ sound and blah, blah, blah. And we criticize it and we crucify it and this and that. But the truth is, KZ does know how to do well V-shaped signatures. They do, especially since the advent of the EDA when it first came, the EDX, sorry, when it first came out, and then the subsequent models that came after that, the EDA Balance, the EDX, the CRA, the CRA Plus, all those, they learned how to do a proper V-shape. And the CXS is one such IEM. It's got a really good V-shaped signature, period. Okay, fine, there's even better, the ZVX and the DFI as well, they're better even. But we can't look at this and just outright say, oh no, this is garbage. No, okay, all of this obviously is done with a budget driver. But the tuning idea is there and it sounds really good. And the difference that you hear basically here in terms of the sound is down to the driver. Now, I can tell you this much as well. If you're listening to the 64 or to the CCA and you're listening to it in a metro or in the bus or whatever, you will probably not notice that much of a difference. You probably won't, and obviously we're talking $20 for the one, $600+ for the other, so hey, here's another example. If you want to have an idea of what the 64 ear sounds like, take a CCA CXS, with no disrespect intended to anybody that does have 64 ears. Take that and put it up quite a few notches in terms of the quality, but the basic sound is a very similar type sound. V, very high quality V, a V that doesn't sacrifice the thickness of the bass and the treble too much in the mids. There's still more than ample clarity in the mids, and if they aren't even better quality, it's just down to the fact that the driver being used is a cheap driver. So you can't expect miracles. But the truth and the reality is that it's a well done IEM. Anyway, enough of that, guys. As always, please like and subscribe. Any questions, you feel free to ask. 64 ears, really nice IEMs. I wish I could afford them. I really do. At least I wouldn't mind owning the copper backplate one. Who knows, maybe I might even contemplate looking at the cheaper models. I just have to see if I can maybe get my hands on one and listen to it first before deciding, because even those cheaper ones are quite a substantial amount of cash. But the truth is that Mr. Saita has taken a V-shaped signature and executed it to perfection. It's not no, it's been executed to perfection. Guys, take care now. Bye-bye.